And we are live. Exciting. We'll be starting in just where's my camera? 1 minute. Yes. And, oh, lost my countdown. All right. We'll be starting in about 45 seconds. And if for anybody who's joining us, if you want to make comments, you just need to you need to go to let StreamYard let you know your name so that we know who you are. It should say on the thing how to do that. Should. And where is it going? There it is. Okay. Looks like it's working. Maybe. Okay. There we go. Perfect. Hey guys, it is Sandy Masuri and Charles Henson. This is so exciting. This is my very first interview for Authors Week, and I am so excited to bring Charles to you guys. So let me tell you a little bit about Charles. Charles Henson is a managing partner of Nashville Computer, the premier cybersecurity and IT services firm in Music City. He was featured in Cybercrime, a documentary made for Amazon Prime, so you guys definitely got to check that out. Cybercrime is a huge thing. This is, some important stuff here. And he's an international best-selling author of the MSSP Playbook. Let's see if I can get that on camera straight there. There we go. And he's often featured in industry publication. He's appeared on the cover of Channel Pro magazine. He's an in-demand speaker. He's appeared at business venues around the country, including Chicago, San Antonio, New York, Los Angeles, and on many stages in between. And on a personal note, I have to tell you that the authors that I'll be bringing you over the next weeks and months are some of my favorite authors and clients, because the stuff that they're talking about is important, it's very timely, and they're just really great people as well. And one more thing about Charles, I don't know if I ever told him this or not, but he is such a down-to-earth and humble guy that you would never know that he is literally one of the biggest rock stars in his industry. When he first contracted me to help him with his book, and I mentioned it to somebody else that comes from the same world, they almost dropped on the floor like, oh my God, he's working with you? And, I'm really glad that I didn't know, Charles, what a rock star you were before, because I would have been totally intimidated.
Nothing to be intimidated about at all.
But your peers love you. You have a really great reputation and name in your industry. And, it's one thing to be liked by your clients, but to be liked by your competitors is really impressive, I think, and speaks to your character. So welcome, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with me.
Thank you, Sandy. Thanks so much for having me on. This is really cool.
So I kind of told a little bit about what you do, but how about we hear it in your own words? Maybe you can tell us more about what managed service providers are and, what you do and who you work with.
Sure. So Nashville Computer is a managed service provider. We call it MSP. And we essentially take care of the IT-related infrastructure for small and medium-sized businesses and some larger businesses as well. But we mainly focus in the small to medium-sized business marketplace. And we come in and we become the outsourced IT department. So think about it, if you're growing a company and you think you might need to hire an IT guy, instead hire us. But what we look at is we focus on securing the business, making sure your IT works, your computers work, all your servers are functioning, and we take care of all your backups and things of that nature so you can focus on growing your business and not have to worry about IT. So we really look at it as creating IT as a return on investment instead of a cost to your business or an annoyance.
Mm, So, I mean, like on the small end, what size company might you be working with? Like one that has maybe just a couple of employees, or are you really working with companies that have hundreds of employees?
Sure. So our smaller clients, I mean, we have some that are 4 users, but typically we're working with 10 to 20 users, 50 users, and we have them as much as 605 users. So
Wow.
in spanning across 7 different locations, including London and Berlin. So we can help any size company really with their information technology. It's just a matter of, how much do you want us to do versus how much you want to be involved in it.
hmm And it's so important right now, especially everybody's working from home. I mean, I imagine that this period has been incredibly busy and challenging for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it was immediately as soon as they shut down Nashville and they said, hey, Davidson County shut down. It was, phones were ringing, tickets were coming in. People were like, hey, how do we continue running our business, but doing it outside of the office? So we went from supporting over 2,000 end users in offices to getting all of those people working remotely and
Wow.
securely. It wasn't just a matter of just, go home and use your home computer. We had to do it securely. There's a lot of thought process that goes into that. So it was extremely busy and overwhelming at times in getting that done. However, if you were to say, hey, let's take 2,000 clients and onboard them and get them working from home within 2 months, you'd say there's no way we could ever do that. Yet
Right.
we did the impossible because it had to be done for businesses to continue functioning and running.
Wow. Wow. This is totally a side note, but obviously, that there's been a lot of discussion over how schools are going to open in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that as a parent that I've been struggling with, although now it turns out in San Diego that schools are going to just go to remote. But when it seemed like we were going to have a choice, I was really kind of struggling with the thought of, should I send my kid to the in-person classroom? Should I try to circumvent the remote learning by creating a pod or something like this? But in the end, I decided that, this really is where the future is going. And to get our kids trained now to be adaptable, to do remote learning, to be able to self-educate on the computer is an incredible skill. Because as you said, with everything moving to remote and home, this is where our future is going to go.
Yeah, well, when you think about kids today, a lot of people say, oh, they're tech savvy. I like to think that they're not really want to think it this way, but they're really tech dependent. They're
Yeah.
on technology. And whereas, we older people, we could live without it. Like, I'd love to
I
go.
don't know that I can remember phone numbers anymore.
Yeah, I don't either. But but the thing is, I mean, kids are going to adapt. They're going to. I mean, Davidson County started back this week, so today's the first day of school. So what we're seeing with that too, for all you parents out there, I start saying mothers, all you parents out there, is that there's about to be a shortage of laptops. I'm not telling you to run out and buy what you have to, but see if you can get those prerequisites from the school if you need whatever you need now, so that you're not sitting there with your child not being able to connect to the classroom because there's a shortage of devices to purchase.
Yeah, and hopefully Zoom and those other systems have done the work that they need to do to prevent the horrible hackings that were happening.
Yeah, there's been a lot done to Zoom. Zoom is they're encrypting their data now. There's settings that you can set inside of Zoom where your data only resides in the U.S. It's under the advanced settings, and then they beefed up their servers. Of course, you think about it, Zoom's making a lot more money now than they were because a lot more people are using paid services.
Right.
And and then of course you can record those, and you can set passwords and waiting rooms now. So it is much more secure than it used to be.
Nice. Yeah. Well, let's bring this back around to let's talk about your book, because I mean, I think that bigger need for security and the managed service provider companies that are getting into it, that was kind of why you wrote it, right? Tell me more about it. Why did you write your book?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's right on topic with what we're talking about with Zoom. It's that security piece, people hacking, people getting in. And, as a managed service provider, an MSP, there's a difference in an MSP and an MSSP. So if you see the book, it's the MSSP Playbook. And what I did is I actually took MSSP is Managed Security Service Provider. So it adds the word security. Well, there's a lot that goes into the security side of things. And so what I wanted to do is create this playbook. But the way this book was born was managed service providers, MSPs, like myself, Nashville Computer, companies are getting hacked by the hackers. And so the hackers started focusing on managed service providers, because if you can hack into me, now you can have 100, 200, 300 of my clients access. So instead of hacking 300 clients or 300 different companies out there, hack one MSP, and now you have the keys to the kingdom of, however many clients that they own and they work with. And so we really started looking at this and we're like, wow, we really need to lock down Nashville Computer. And what does that look like? Wow. We had to put two-factor authentication, make sure we don't use the same password anywhere. We had to just make sure that our VPN was running and encryption was in place, and that our laptops were set up that if they were to be stolen. And there's so much things around the technology realm, and I'm not going to get all geeky on you. That's what the book's for. But so what we did is we took everything that we did and we put it into a checklist. And then the cool thing is I had a company reach out and they're like, hey, we want you to do the speaking engagement and we need a deliverable. And I'm like, well, I've got this checklist and we can make it into an ebook. And so part of the book started birthing from an ebook that I wrote with the checklist in it. And the cool thing about that, Sandy, was I got paid to write the ebook.
Nice.
I actually got paid to write the book. And then they said, hey, look, we want you to speak at some venues and events for us that we have upcoming. And so they flew me into a couple of different cities as a test, and the response was overwhelming. And I was like, all right, look, a lot of people need this information. So I started composing the rest of the book. And so putting that together, and I remember I was in Vegas. It was New Year's Eve. And we had been in LA for Christmas, and we went to Vegas for New Year's Eve. And Scott Beck, which you've helped as well, introduced me to you. And I was like, I've got to get this done. Like, I don't like New Year's resolutions, but I'm like, you know what? This is a goal that I'm going to set, and I'm just going to get it done. And that's when you and I talked. I think I was actually in Vegas at the time. The place was packed with people, which, it's not that way today. But, I'm so fortunate that I was there during that time. But, knowing that, look, now I have somebody to hold me accountable. And you said, okay, first thing I need to know is what date are we launching? When's the pre-launch? And I'm like, okay. So we kind of did the backwards math on that to figure out, how long it would take me to write the complete thing and put it together, editing and all this stuff. And then we set the date. And then at that point, it was like, okay, I got to get this done. And I can remember going home from work one evening, and I told my wife, I was like, look, I got to get started on this book. I said, I'll be in bed whenever I get to bed. And at 7 p.m. I sat down, and I think it was like 3:30 in the morning. I finally closed the laptop, and I had written a lot of the book.
Wow.
As far as like the outline, some of the stories that I wanted to tell, some of the other things. I didn't fill in all the details, but kind of the shape of it, and it started coming together. And so, but it was because I hired you and I had that deadline that really pushed me. And let me tell you, I've had the idea for the book in the past, but it was a little bit different. It wasn't around the security side of it as much, but, and I drafted up like a few of the chapters and things, and had these, things that I would brainstorm. And this is not my first book. And I can tell you that not having that deadline and not having somebody saying, okay, we're going to launch on this date. Do you have your cover created? Do you have this done? Do you have, these different aspects of it? Can I get your bio and stuff like that? Those things, they kind of force your hand, and
right.
is really needed when you're when you're wanting to write a book and you keep putting it off because life happens.
Right.
The kids, there's parties, there's school, there's so many things that you're dealing with school, with kids day in and day out. And it's like your book just sits there in the back of your brain. And, so it's been very instrumental hiring you, getting you on board with this, telling you about it. It even gave me some different ideas about, the direction of the book and what else I could do with it. So, I personally want to thank you for pushing me, setting the date, and then proceeding forward with it, because
Well,
it is a lot of work to put a book together. It is time consuming, but if you're out there and you're on the fence of, do I really want to write a book, or I've been thinking about this book for 5 years, 10 years, whatever, it's time to just be held accountable, set a date, and then your feet's to the fire at that point. Now it has to be done.
right. Yeah. So I'm going to come back to some of those points, but I want to talk a little bit about your mindset before you started writing it. I mean, did you have any fears about writing and publishing? Did you have concerns or reservations? I mean, besides just jumping on it and making it a priority, was there anything holding you back?
Making the time to write. That was the only thing really holding me back. And, I thought, well, it'd be cool to have another book. I mean, I took a cloud report that came from a marketing company, and I took the report, and it was like the 23 things that you need to know about cloud computing. And I turned those into chapters. And so I did that while my son was playing chess on Saturday. So these tournaments take, it's like 5 games, and they take hours. Like literally you're there for like 8-9 hours during the day. And so I used a lot of that downtime to write that cloud book. And when I knew that I wanted to write this book, it was like, okay, I need to write the next book. It needs to be about security. And I know who I'm going to target. I already know who I wanted to teach. But then, when the opportunity came along and the vendor said, hey, do you want to, do you have anything to contribute, and we want to pay you for your expertise? Then I was like, you know what, let me do it now, because there's no better time than right now to make that decision and then set the date and the timeline.
Yeah. Very cool. So what, I mean, you had done one before, so even you can think back to the first book. What gave you the confidence to be able to get it done, that you were going to be able to not just get your thoughts onto paper, but the entire process?
So to be totally honest and transparent, it's not about what gave me the, oh, I can write a book. It's I need this for marketing. In my business, you have to be credible. You have to be somebody that people want to buy from. If they know, like, and trust you, then they're going to buy your services. They're going to trust you. And what happened, Sandy, is that I started writing books. So I started with a shared book. It was a done for you book where you do the editing and you put your name in it, but you put your copyright on it as well, and you can't put it on Amazon.
Right, yeah.
It was for a marketing thing, which was okay. It was great. And then I did a shared Amazon best-selling book, which was okay, but it still wasn't my own book. And in the back of my mind, I kept saying, telling myself, well, you really need your own book. So I wrote the cloud book, and it did exactly what I wanted it to do. It built me up as somebody in our industry that is knowledgeable. And so the next thing that I did is I actually was involved in a cybercrime documentary. It's on Amazon Prime. If you have Prime, it's cyberspace crime. It's great for families. It's great for individuals, not just businesses. But it even teaches you like what you should and shouldn't do and have on your cell phones for your kids. So a little plug for that.
Oh, wow.
On Amazon Prime. But with that, what happened was I stopped having sales calls and meeting with clients and them saying, what do you charge for IT services? The conversation started to change of how do we do business with Charles and National Computer? And so it really changes the dynamic of closing more sales and more business, because people see that you are that expert. You're that person. They're seeing you out there. You start making videos. You start talking about these things. You start doing Facebook Lives. And some of you guys may be cringing, saying, "Oh, I'll never do that." And let me tell you, I would never speak in front of public before. But I started with webinars, and I wouldn't even do a live webinar. I'd literally like pre-record it and then play it back and pretend it was live. But I never vouched it. I never said it was going to be live. But then I started building up, and you just have to start somewhere. And there's a saying, you have to get started to be great. You don't have to be great to get started.
I love that.
And the thing is if I write the book, I'm going to build credibility. And what's cool is this book is making money. So last week I had these deposits in my bank account and they were pending. And it was really weird because I'd just gotten a letter from a title company saying that my financial information may have been compromised by a hacker.
Oh no.
And including my banking information. So I immediately called my bank and I'm like, hey, what are these things? And they're like, oh, those are incoming credits from Amazon. I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah, right. I forgot about those. And so to date, I've made over $2,000 from this book. And
wow.
That's the side benefit of having the book is, the little royalty checks that come in from it. And so anyways, what got me into it was building that credibility and building that foundation to know that, look, I'm in a business, and the way that I continue growing my business is to make money. And that's by bringing on new clients. And if anybody out there is running a business and you want more clients, what do you need? More marketing. And so, the guy from The Prophet, I forget his name, he was speaking at an event recently. And they said, what?
Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue too.
Yeah. And so they said, what is it? What's the number one thing you need? Marcus Lemonis. They said, what's the number one thing you should be doing during this pandemic? And he said, you need to double down on your marketing. And so what does double down on your marketing mean? It means to really get your marketing content out there. So right now, if you don't have a book, now is the best time to have that book, because as your clients are looking to buy the services that you offer, you have to have that book. You have to have some medium for them to see you and be out there. And if you don't want to do Facebook Lives, you don't want to do videos and everything else, then let your book speak for you.
Yeah. It really gives you an opportunity to literally whisper in your potential clients' ears.
It's you reading into their ears. You are literally talking into their brain at that point.
Yeah.
And you are the authoritative figure.
So you mentioned a little bit about, taking the time when you were at your son's chess tournaments to do the writing. I'd like to learn more about how you actually did the writing, what your writing process was. You had mentioned that you found a white paper and that you started by taking those as the topics, but tell me more about once you made up your mind, this is happening, now what?
Yeah, so that was the cloud book, and that's the way when I took a white paper. This book is 100%. It started out with a blank piece of paper. And what we did is we built out the checklist. And then I talked a little bit about each of the items in the checklist and why you would want to do that. And then I started thinking, well, you'll want to know the backstory. And so because I am in IT and because I do work with clients, I've worked with the FBI, I've worked with the CIA on multiple cases of fraud, cyber crime. And so with that, I started backing into some of the stories that got me started down the path of speaking on cybercrime. And then I used some of the educational topics in my webinars and some of the seminars that I have done, and I crafted that into telling people why they want to read the book, why they need to continue reading the book. And I really started out with some stories that would get them engaged to say, wow, yeah, I don't ever want to face that problem with a client. I never want that phone call from a client. But I've unfortunately had those phone calls from clients in the early days of, ransomware and people hacking and breaches happening. And, you see a Russian keyboard installed and somebody's typing on a computer and it's 7 o'clock at night and you get that phone call and it's like, hey, I don't think this person should be on this device. And so you learn from the different problems and issues that you've had, and then you turn those into stories that people can relate to. And so I wrote this book primarily for managed service providers. And so I've written it in a way that because I was a tech and had been a tech for years, I know how they think, I know how they operate. And so I wrote it in story mode. And then basically I explained like different pieces and different parts. And so there was a lot of stuff that, like, when it came to compliance, I reached out to a guy that does compliance, and I'm like, hey man, like, you did this whole 1 hour presentation, you talked about that. And he was like, look, go grab my PowerPoint presentation, go watch the speech, anything you want to use of that, it's yours. He said, the more people we can protect, the better.
Nice.
And so he was like, okay, let's do this. And then I called an actual MSSP, a security service provider, and I interviewed him and said, hey man, look, let's talk about this. What are some of the things that you're seeing in our industry? What's happening? And tell me, like, if I use a play on words, instead of being a managed security service provider, if I use security centric to get these guys to step up their security game. He's like, yeah, I absolutely love that. And as an MSSP, I appreciate that. He said, because it would actually draw more business for me being the MSSP. So more MSPs would hire him. Right. And so I interviewed, I want to say like 4 different people to talk about the different things. And then I took the stories that I learned from them and some inspiration from some of the topics that we talked about. And those are also in the book. So there's a couple of chapters in the book that how to hire an MSSP and then your compliancy. Those are directly somebody else's content that I have permission to use, but I put them into my own words. It's my regurgitated version of what they told me. So, even if you don't have all the information or all the knowledge, it's easy to go out and interview somebody. I mean, I don't know how to write a book, but I could probably write a quick ebook on the process that I went through with Sandy. It's not what I want to do. And I could probably ask you, I could interview you and say, hey, I'm writing this little article. Can I talk to you about this? It may generate business for you because it's definitely not something I want to do, but it's something that I put out there, and I could name you as one of the sources, and then people start calling you. But I'm the author. So you just look for inspiration from anywhere you can, and people in your industry and people that have laid the path before you that have done some of these things.
So I want to talk a little bit more about like your very beginning process. I mean, when you're starting to think, okay, I'm going to write this book, are you just kind of holding it all in your head? Do you write yourself an outline? Is it kind of a brain dump? I mean, in that first instance of you figuring out, here's what I know, here's what I have to learn. That is, these are the people I got to find people to interview, or I got to research this part. And, here's what it's going to be about, and here's who I'm talking to. Like, was it just kind of like, it just kind of all came together in your head, or was it more?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of in my head of what I wanted to do, but I really wasn't sure how to put it down. And so, I looked at it and I was like, okay, most stories, they have the plot, the character, and they have some, objection that they have to overcome, and they've got like the end result. Little Red Riding Hood, she wants to take cookies to grandma, but there's a bad wolf and she needs to get from A to B, right? And so there's this whole story. It's like Lightning McQueen when he wants to win the Piston Cup, and he's on this, quest to win the Piston Cup, but he becomes a different character. All these different stories, and you can see it in any movie. If you miss the first few minutes of a movie, you might as well just wait and go to the next showtime, right? You've missed that integral part of, what their desire is and what the outcome they're looking for. But then there's that villain or something that's in the way. And so I kind of sat down and looked at this and said, okay, let me just, from a simplistic term, I said, let me just create chapters. And so I just wrote down chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. And I don't know how other people's brains work, but if I sit down at a blank piece of paper and I just need to start typing, forget it. Like I'm done. Like,
yeah, I think for a lot of people, that's really overwhelming.
Yeah. So if I wrote down, chapter 1, the introduction to cybersecurity, whatever. I don't even know what my chapter titles are now, right? But like chapter 2, I want to talk about, the threat landscape. Chapter 3 may be about this. Chapter 4, I should talk about that. And then I come back later and add some things to that. But then I start writing a story about what I want in an introduction. And then as I'm typing, I'm making notes of, oh, this needs to be in chapter 3 or whatever. I should also include this, because now my mind is thinking, okay, I don't want to leave that out. So I go ahead and make a note and just along to that sentence that's my, tickler to remind me, I'll just put a little note that this should probably go in chapter 5 under whatever. And then from there, one page turns into two pages turns into three. And then I start looking at things from a different perspective, because now it's not just a blank piece of paper. It's something that you're growing and expanding. And to me, it's very easy to take a story, hear it, and then regurgitate that story and put it on paper. I think one of the things that really helped me was I do a lot of public speaking. And I was getting paid to do public speaking before the pandemic. I was being flown all over the US, and actually had booked one for Canada, and it got canceled because they closed the border. So I was bummed, because I could have said I'm an international speaker, but now I'm not. So
Soon.
yeah, I know, but I'm always looking at those things. But because I took those topics, I'm like, okay, if I take my presentation of what I want to write about, and then, and that's the other piece that I did too, is once I wrote down the chapters, I actually put them into PowerPoint presentation. And then I moved them around as I saw that they may fit into better parts, because I can lead, like we didn't mean to, but we started talking about Zoom, school, Zoom, it not being secure. Now it's more secure. Then we talked about the book, what got me started, which it all tied together. But if we came in here now and started talking about kids going back to school and Zoom, it'd make no sense.
Right.
We've already passed that chapter. We read it earlier. So just, you have to analyze the book, the content, what you want the reader to do. And Little Red Riding Hood didn't start out at her grandmother's house delivering cookies and having cookies and milk with her and then heading back home. She started at home, she baked the cookies, and now she was on a quest. So you really have to kind of reanalyze. And I'll tell you, as you go through the editing process and you start reading the book for the second or third time, you start realizing this chapter should have come earlier, and then I can lead into this story. And sometimes you'll read a book and you'll see that they have redundant data. It's like, oh, well, they mentioned that in the last chapter. They mentioned that 2 chapters ago.
Right.
That has to be done, because sometimes people skip chapters.
Right.
And so you have to be thinking like a reader, like various readers, of how are they going to get this content? How is it going to be read? And if they do skip around, then I want to make sure that I tell this again. And then again, sometimes people just don't hear it the first time you tell them. And so it's okay to repeat what you've said prior, just don't do it too frequently.
Right. Yeah. I really love that tip about the PowerPoint. I've never heard that before. And it makes so much sense, because you're right. It's just so easy to drag and drop and move things around. Yeah. But once you have it all set up in PowerPoint, then how do you take it and turn it into a Word document or something like that? I mean, then do you have to physically transcribe it, or is there a program that then translates it?
Yeah. So it's funny, because this book, and I'm going to be totally honest with you, this book has been all three. It has been ghostwritten, it has been transcribed, and it has been written by me. And so, you try things and you see how they work. So I originally had set out, and I had watched a how-to video, and it said, create your chapters, create the stuff, and then talk about your content, talk about what you want it to be. And then you record that. You can do it with your voice memos on an iPhone, or however you want to do that. And then there's services out there. I used Rev, and I sent that to them, and they transcribed it. And so then you're supposed to send that off to an editor. You're not supposed to reread it. You're supposed to send it to an editor, let them clean it up. And so 1 or 2 of the chapters were done by Rev. I was in Puerto Rico and had hired a ghostwriter. And I was on vacation out there unplugging, and I had done 3 different interviews that week with the ghostwriter. And I love her. She's great. She did a great job putting the content together, but it wasn't in my language. It wasn't
voice.
In my, yes, exactly. It wasn't written in my voice. And so I started modifying the stuff that came from Rev, the stuff that came from me. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna type it from my heart and from my brain, the way it feels. And so if I were to do it again, I'd probably just have written the entire thing myself.
But PowerPoint you're using as kind of creating that outline, that organizational structure?
Yeah, sure. So everybody on this, everybody's just watching this has probably been, it's safe to assume they've watched the webinar, they've been to the webinar, and they see the person on this, they see the PowerPoint presentation, right?
Right. And if they hadn't before the pandemic, for sure now.
Yeah, exactly. So why do people create PowerPoints? It's so that they can stay on topic and they can stay focused, and it guides them through what they're going to speak in front of that public audience. So why not use the exact same technology to figure out how your book is going to flow? And you're not going to write your whole book in that PowerPoint presentation, but you kind of want to figure out your flow of how it's going to work. And you could put like my chapter on tools cyber criminals use. Now I can put like 5 different bullet points or 10 different bullet points. Now there's 10 different bullet points. Now each one of those is going to be a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. Now I can go into great detail. And if I run out of detail to put into that, then I can go on to the next bullet point, and I can put information into that. And then later, while I'm thinking about something else or while I'm driving, I'll have a thought and I'm like, oh, I can add this as part of that previous bullet point that I was talking about earlier. So really the chapter and then the bullet points are your talking things of that chapter.
I love that. I love that. I'm definitely going to be stealing that to recommend to other people. So you also started talking about this a little bit, the effects of having your book. So I'd like to revisit that. And if you could share with us some more, what has your book done for you personally, sure, business-wise, financially, everything?
Yeah, other than...
and when did your book come out? Because it's only been out a short period of time, right? I mean, this was your first royalty check that you just got.
No, it's not the first one.
Oh, not the first one?
No, it's not the first royalty check.
On the MSSP book?
Yeah, I've gotten a couple.
Oh, right, April. It came out in April.
Yeah, in April.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's just now March, though, isn't it? I mean,
exactly. I have no idea what month it is. I can't believe it's August already. How did that happen?
I have no idea. But other than the awkward call to the bank saying, "What are these credits coming into my account?" It's the speaking engagements. It's the communication with people. So I literally have used this book. I got speaking gigs in Chicago, and was flown out there and paid. And then I've also had speaking gigs where they paid me. They were going to pay me to do a series of different cities. And so what happened was the pandemic set in and those shows obviously canceled. And they're like, look, we still want to use you. We still want to use the content. Are there any ways that we can license the book? And so they have a license for the book to distribute 2,000 copies to their vendor. It's a vendor. And so they license it for 2,000 copies to send to their MSPs that are their partners. And then they have prospects as well that's going to be attending these virtual events, and they're going to offer it to them as a free download.
Nice.
And so I've actually made a couple of different sales from the actual book, meaning that they bought the license to use it, and I created an ebook as an excerpt from the book, and then got paid speaking engagements from it. Because people, yes, I am getting known in my industry, but that comes with getting out there and speaking and being that educator and putting your name out there and doing those videos and getting involved in your industry. And by doing those things, you start getting known. Vendors start looking at you and they're like, hey, here's somebody that we should talk to. And I'll be honest with you, I ordered extra copies because my thought was, if that one vendor paid and asked if they could license it for 2,000 copies, then why not go back to there's at least 50 different vendors I know of in the IT space, and it's a matter of crafting and creating that marketing letter and going to those other vendors, sending them a copy of the book with a letter in there saying, hey, how would you like to deliver this book to your clients and make more sales?
What a great idea.
What my book does is it helps MSPs become security centric and helps them sell that vendor's product. And so
Yeah.
I did not mention any vendors specifically in this book for that reason, because I wanted to be able to go to other vendors and tell them that, hey, here's a good book, it's a good guide, it's a how-to for MSPs, and it even talks about going to market. And so inside the book, I share how I take the security products and then go pitch that to my clients. And so I'm teaching, as it's not just an educational book, but it also teaches them. And for a $20 investment, they can make a lot of money. They can make a huge ROI if they take the advice in the book and take it to market.
Wow. So that's really great with the licensing. I mean, that's kind of an unexpected income stream from the book beyond what you had anticipated and planned.
Yeah, it is. I mean, originally I was going to create like a training course and teach people how to do training and create like a mastermind and all this other stuff. To be honest with you, with running the company and running the business and everything else, that's not something I want to focus on right now. But I have that credibility and people in the industry know me. So if I were to want to create that mastermind group, I could literally create that and then start driving clients to my landing page. They're already going to know who I am, especially if they read the book. And then they're like, yeah, this is the guy that I want to teach me how to close more sales.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having that book kind of not just the credibility, but it makes you an instant celebrity as well.
It does. It absolutely does. And like you said, in my industry, people already kind of knew who I was. And let me tell you, if you don't like public speaking, practice, because you never know what opportunity. There's a saying, I think it was Les Brown used to say, he said, it's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared.
Oh, yeah.
And so as you're going in and talking to people in a sales meeting and you're trying to close a new business, if you can do public speaking and just start getting your foot wet in front of like 10 people and 15, then 30, then 100, and I know some of you are cringing saying, I'll never do that. I said the same thing a few years ago. But in 2017, I ran in my industry, there's a competition. And so I ran for a new car. The grand prize was a new car. And so I presented in front of 1,200 of my peers.
Wow.
The audience vote is who wins the car. And it was, I was up against 4 different people. And I won the car. So it was a 2017.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So it's really cool. And so that gave me credibility in my industry. So think about some of the industry events that you go to, and then think about how do you build credibility in your own industries. And then if you can launch a book and then get with the organizers of that event and say, hey, I would love a 30-minute speaking, I'll do it for free. I'll come up and speak to 30 minutes of how my book has helped me or what I've learned in this industry, just something to give back to your community. It's going to build that credibility. And then you're going to start, and that point, if you want to start building out something else where you're running like a training program or a mastermind group or something like that, then people in your industry are going to start knowing who you are. So it's a side effect of building your credibility inside, for your business itself. It's also a little side gig that you could be running.
Well, and that kind of brings us to the next question, which you've kind of touched on. But in your opinion, why is it important for people to write their book or tell their stories?
Well, yeah, I touched on it earlier. Number one is a lot. If you drive by a cemetery, you're going to see a lot of buried dreams. People have dreams, they have goals, they have ambitions. And what happens is life gets in the way. And you think, okay, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that next week, maybe next year, maybe when the kids get out of school, maybe when I retire. So the question is what have you been putting off and for how long and why? Why really have you been putting it off? Are you putting it off and making excuses? Or are you putting it off because you really don't want it to happen and come to life? So a lot of people are afraid of failure too. What if I publish a book and nobody reads it?
Yeah.
My thought is, who cares? I mean, I could give this book out to 1,000 people. Those 2,000 people that get this book, none of them may read it, but that's okay. It's up to them. But I'll tell you that I put the book out there, and I've had emails from people. I've had video conference calls where I'm on a conference call and somebody holds up the book and they're like, "Wow, I can't believe this. This is great information. I've got a lot to do." And so why wouldn't you want to write the book? Why wouldn't you want to get it out there? And then, the thing about it is, if I have a prospect that I'm going to meet with, I can let them know that, hey, I'm an international best-selling author. And I've been in cybercrime. It's on Amazon Prime. I've been, I wrote this cloud book. I wrote this, and so with that, I mean, if you don't have the book, then what credibility do you have? You can write blog posts and you can create videos and other content, but when you have something where you can actually go to Amazon, it's got the ISBN number on it, and then you can go and update your author's page on Amazon. You can upload photos to that and update your bio on that. I mean, there's just so much credibility that you're building inside of that. And then the other side effect is, if you can get people to talk about your book and it references your company, NashvilleComputer.com or whatever, in those references, then Google sees those links back to your site. And so you will gain rankings on Google because they see you have backlinks. And I'm not going to get technical, but if you have another site that links to you, Google sees that and they give you a +1.
Right. Yeah, and especially with Amazon linking back to you, right? In your author page. Yeah. I know that's one of the pages that'll show up, when somebody does a search for you. Those author pages have a lot of weight.
It does. Absolutely. And so it's absolutely, to me, it's like, how would I have not written a book? If you own a company, if you're trying to grow your business and you need information out there and you have people that buy from you, other businesses that buy from you, or individuals that buy from you, why wouldn't you want to build your credibility? You have the knowledge. Why are they coming to you? Because they don't have the knowledge. They need your expert advice. But how are they going to choose you versus your competition? If your competition writes a book, now what? How are you going to compete against your competition now? Because they're like, well, I saw this great book about XYZ in your company or in your organization. What do you think of that? And they're like, what are you going to say to that? It's your competitor that's now got the upper hand. So why wouldn't you go ahead and just right now say, today's the day I'm deciding that by December 31st, I'm going to have my rough draft done. I'm going to have this thing published, or whatever goal you want to set. The thing that I love about setting that goal and that timeline, like going with you, I learned this years ago, is I dreaded that first webinar. And I just absolutely just cringed at the fact of thinking that people were going to be listening to me speak. And some of you guys are probably like, wow, this guy's, he's speaking, well, this is years later, right? But used to, I would not get on camera if you paid me. But what we did is we put the date in the newsletter, and we had to register. Okay, great. Now I have to present this thing. And so I say the same thing with the book is, get somebody, get Sandy and sit down with her and just, when she said, here's the date of when we have to get this done, here's your launch date, and here's everything that I need prior to that. I had a laundry list of things to do, but I was very focused on knowing what I needed to go work on. I think the biggest thing that draws people back and keeps them from taking that step is, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to create that title page. I don't know, the copyright, the ISBN number. I don't know how to publish this thing on Amazon. And I'll tell you, I've been through that process and it wasn't fun. And that's why I was like, you know what? When Scott told me the services that you provide and what you do, I was like, that's a no-brainer. I don't even have to focus on that piece of it. All I got to do is focus on the content, get it created, and then get it over to you, and your editors do their magic, and then voila, people start making purchases, and then the royalty check starts coming in.
I will say, I think that the conversation that I had with you prior to you signing on with me was the shortest ever. I don't even think we had even talked on the phone. I think it was all through email, and it was just kind of like, yep, you got what I need. Okay, how much? We're done. We're doing it. Good, we're done.
Well, I know what I enjoy doing, and I know what I don't enjoy doing. And I don't enjoy going to Amazon, creating the account, creating the back end content, going to the publisher, going and creating an ISBN number. I mean, yes, I've done that and I
Right.
know how to do all that stuff, but it's not something that I want to do. And it's not something I want to get bogged down with. I'm about to embark on writing a book. You think I want to do all those other things too? No.
Right.
Let me just focus on what I can focus on and delegate what I don't need to focus on. And then by having you there, it really helped me because I knew all the back end stuff was just being done. And then, I think we did have one little problem, or a couple things, we saw, and then it was like, oh, hey, it'd just be reach out to Sandy, and it's like, hey, I saw this thing, and you're like, okay, I'm on it. 5 minutes later, okay, it's fixed. I'm like, wow, like I didn't have to go do the research, I didn't have to go find it, I didn't go fix anything, and it's just like my cloud stuff. When I did that on my own, what a journey. And, I had it categorized wrong. I didn't know that you could have it in multiple categories. So I'm sure I totally missed out on things because I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know the process. And by hiring you, it was a piece of cake. It was a cakewalk.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So I probably know the answer to this one mostly, but if you have another book that you want to write, would you do it again? And when you do it again, what things will you do the same or differently?
Well, yes, there is another book that I want to write, but right now it's not the right time in my life to write it. There's actually 2 different books that I have in mind. A third one, which is kind of a copy of this, which really wouldn't take much time and I wouldn't publish it. It would only be for internal marketing because I want to create the same book, but make it directly to IT admins of companies. So I can just make those tweaks, and I'm not going to publish that because too much of the content would be the same. And so Amazon, I'm sure, would ding me for that. The other is I want to teach people that, their identity is already dead. Like you're already compromised, like by being on Facebook and social media and giving away all your information about everything that you like and where you go on vacations and checking in at all these places. You pretty much have given away your identity and anything about you. And then, and then I've come from a background of being raised in the country, not having running water and living on a farm and, to going into the military and then growing into a business and then, running a successful business and then, becoming a mini celebrity, if you will. And so I think there's definitely a book in there that could inspire others to take those steps and get out of their comfort zone and understand that they too can do what everybody else is. They're human just like everybody else. They just need to practice. And so what I would do the same for those other 2 books is I would definitely hire like you to help me set up the book and then the timeline. So if I'm ready to write that book and I say, okay, by December 2020, I want to have that book written, then I would go ahead and engage with you. And then I would back in my timeline. So I'd start in December. By December, I have to have this done. By, Q3 of 2020, I have to have this done. By Q2, I would have to have this done. And so that means I've got to get the bulk of it done by this. And so I would just kind of, that way I have the roadmap. I have a GPS that's telling me by December 31st, 2020, I'm going to reach my destination of having that book launched. And this is what it's going to look like, all the turns that I'm going to have to take to get there. So, a lot of times you get on an airplane and you're flying from Nashville to Los Angeles. And what we worry about is getting from our house, getting to the airport, and then getting to the right gate. And then we get on the plane. Then a lot of the work is done for us. And then it's like, okay, we're at our destination. Now we have to find our baggage. And so there's so many things. You're like the airplane. Like you can carry us so far without us having to even think about it. Right. And I'll tell you, if you guys get back into flying and you have downtime for 2 to 3 hours, put down the Sky Miles magazine and open up your iPad and start writing chapters. Because I spent a lot of time on planes last year, and a lot of these thoughts happened while I was up in the air. because
Mm.
I use that downtime. No internet.
Yeah.
I didn't connect to the internet. I'm not taking phone calls. I'm not texting people. I'm sitting there with uninterrupted, except for food beverage, uninterrupted time to write that for 2 to 3 hours while you're on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, once we all start flying again, anyway.
Yes, exactly. So that's what I would do. I would do it exactly the same way because, for me to set out and drive to LA, it'd probably take me 2 to 3 days with all the stops and everything between, or I could just go and partner with somebody and have them get me there. And a lot of the stuff I wouldn't even have to deal with.
I really like that analogy. I've never heard that one before either. You're coming up with a whole bunch of great stuff here that I've never heard. Thank you.
It just came out of nowhere.
So what other advice do you have for other experts who want to publish a book, or who are sitting on the fence, or are thinking about it, or can't get past the idea of the blank page?
Well, if you can't get past the blank page, open up PowerPoint. Download a book template. Something off the internet that's just a book template that's got introduction and title and chapter and preface and all these other things. And that way you're not staring at a blank page anymore.
Mm.
You have 3 pages, 5 pages of content. It's not really good content, but it's something that you can grow upon.
A structure, yeah.
Yeah. And then, if you don't want to just set a blank page and you don't know where to start, maybe you just start by telling a story.
Mm-hmm.
What is Little Red Riding Hood wanting to do? She's wanting to bake cookies and get them to grandmother's house. Where's grandmother? Well, it's through the woods. How is she going to get there? Well, she has to be careful because there's a big bad wolf. Right. So you just start telling the story. You think Little Red Riding Hood was written just like that. It was a thought. It was probably a kid's story that was taught, or told to a kid at night when they couldn't sleep. And that story turned into, this little fairy tale that everybody knows about now. And everybody has, passed it on to their kids and their kids. And so if you have that information in your head, you owe it to people in your industry and that are your clients. You owe it to them to get that information out of your head and educate them and help them in knowing what to buy, how to buy, or even, what they should be asking when they're buying. So here's an idea for you. If you sell a product or a service, write out the 21 questions or the 15 questions or the 7 questions, I don't care, of what your customers should ask your competition before they hire them. And so start with that. And so just start with something that's just very simple. And maybe you could use that in your marketing as a deliverable to mail to your prospect and say, hey, here's 7 things you should ask any IT professional, whatever professional it is that you are. Just write out the 7 things or the 5 things that they should be asking. And that itself will set you apart from your competition. But when and this is a cool thing that I've done, is I've actually ordered the book on Amazon and had it shipped.
Oh, yeah.
And so they got a delivery from Amazon, and it came from Amazon Prime, and it was the book. When they opened it, it was the book with my name on it, and they had a meeting with me later that week.
Wow. Yeah, that is such an incredible foot in the door technique.
Isn't it? So
it really is very, very powerful.
My competition didn't have it show up. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. That's great. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share?
No, I mean, the process, the simplicity of what you do, and for anybody that's interested, Sandy has the stats on this. I don't really have the stats, but I can tell you that I had royalty checks coming in from 5 or 6 different countries. And, the cool thing about this is that people in Australia have reached out and said, hey, man, I saw your book. I really liked it. People are commenting from around the globe. And even if your clients and your prospects may not be in those areas, why not get it out into more people's hands and inspire other people?
Yeah.
Because if somebody else sees your book or they see your work and what's come out of your heart, it may inspire them in ways that you never knew it would. And, to me, I would like to think that I've helped protect a lot of MSPs from the cyber criminals from being hacked and from leaving their systems wide open. So what is it that you have in your mind and that you do and that you could share from your heart to get it on that paper into the publisher's hands, onto Amazon, and then into the people's hands so that you can make this world a better place.
Nice. Oh, this has been so fantastic. I have so enjoyed speaking with you. So how can people learn more about you?
Yeah, sure. So you can simply go to nationalcomputer.com. And if you're interested in having, if you want more information on me speaking, you can go to charleshenson.net. charleshenson.net. It's not .com, it's .net, N-E-T. And so there I have a speakers page, and we're doing virtual events now. I've got have one lined up for August and another the first week of September. So I'll be doing I'm still doing speaking. It's just in a different platform. So I'm not flying into those cities. I'm just doing it via Zoom, and it's really good. It's really educational, and it's something that we're all dealing with technology. Cyber criminals are always trying to gain access to our systems, and so
Yes.
the more we can do to protect ourselves, the better. So knowledge.
charleshenson.net.
charleshenson.net.
Fabulous, fabulous. Great. Well, I thank you so much for joining us. I also just want to throw a plug out there of my own for everybody, that if you want to get a copy of my book, Book It, which is telling you a lot of the very things that Charles and I have been talking about, then you can download this from my website, expertbook4 and the letter u.com, expertbook4u.com, and you can download a free copy of my book. And then to learn more about Charles and about his about protecting yourself from cyber crime and everything like that, go to charleshenson.net. And of course, do go over to Amazon and pick up a copy of his book, MSSP Playbook, as well. Still haven't quite figured out my camera angles.
It's not all geek speaking. It's most of it's written in plain English, and so some of it is technical in nature, but it still gives you a good idea of what you need to be looking out for. So I just want to say publicly that Sandy, your process and everything you've done, and let me tell you that I've already gotten an ROI from hiring you to do the book, and you're helping me get to that international best-selling status has actually helped me get on stage and help me license this book. If I had just written the book and tried to do this on my own, and it was just a book on Amazon, they would have never paid me for those 2,000 licenses. And,
wow.
They would have never done that. But because of the publicity behind it, the pre-launch, the launch, the steps that you walked me through, that's what's really helped catapult this book and help me get speaking engagements that are paid speaking engagements, as well as licensing of the book. So I want to just publicly say thank you for all your help and your hard work on that, and for not making me do all the back end work.
Well, it was my pleasure, and thank you for the kind words there.
Absolutely.
And well, I guess that's it for our very first author's interview. Charles, I can't thank you enough for being my first guinea pig and bearing with me as I figured out the tech. This has been incredible. You are a wealth of information, and I can't wait to see what comes next with you.
All right. Thank you so much, Sandy.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.